behind the sofa. There it is. Okay, so the top story today in the tech news is that Binance says that 2 million BNB. May, you'll have to tell us what BNB are. I guess that's a coin or a chain of some kind.
Yeah, that's the token native to the Binance Smart Chain.
Okay. Oh, it's the Binance chain coin or whatever.
Correct.
Got it. So Binance says 2 million of those BNBs worth approximately 570 million US, which, and US by US, I mean, that's a fiat currency that's used in America, that people are using as well. And they print it out on paper in different denominations. They even have these little circular metal coins, they call them. And you can put them in machines and all kinds of crazy stuff. Anyway, so 2 million BNB are worth about 570 million of this American currency called dollars. And they were stolen, these 2 million BNBs, from its BNB chain in an exploit. The majority of the BNB are in the hacker's wallet. About $1 million worth were unrecovered. So hackers have stolen about $100 million worth of the BNB, the Binance linked blockchain. So another day, another sort of black eye with the crypto world in terms of security. And the reality is, some chains and protocols are safer than others, no doubt. And some are more robust and stay up more than others. Cough, cough, Solana. But they all suffer when things like this happen, because in the minds of, grandmas and grandpas around the world, they're all seemingly interchangeable. It's this new landscape of cryptos and blockchains, and when one of them fails, essentially they all get tarnished and painted with the same brush to some degree. So it's quite regrettable, even for Bitcoin to some extent, which relatively is proven to be very, very robust indeed. Anyways, the next
Tyler, for this case, right, whose liability is it? Is it Binance Exchange liability, or is it the user's liability for this 570 million hack?
I don't know is my short answer. I don't know if anyone else on stage knows. Feel free to jump in on that one.
Tyler, it'll probably be Binance, which is why CZ's been doing all these interviews.
They put out
Because,
a statement. Yeah, CZ.
yeah, he's looking at, well, basically understanding the two sides of it. There's the Binance Smart Chain and the BNB Beacon Chain. And you just said that those were BNB tokens. You just said they were BNB tokens, right?
Yeah.
It happened on the cross-chain bridge. And if you imagine like a changing of the trains at like Germany or something, and sometimes you miss the train and you're screwed, it's a bit like there's always an opportunity for someone to like divert you to a new train if you're not paying attention or if that bridge is not secure. And in essence, that was where it was exploited. And this is the same thing. It's ironic to see that the same error is happening with bridges that happened as well with other hacks. Like, you would think that people would learn that the bridges need to be more secured and they need to be audited and then they need to be structured more solidly than they are currently. So I think that the exploit attaching itself to the bridge in that space, like that part of the process, is, I believe, where that is where more has to be paid attention to, because the cross-chain bridge called the BSC token hub resulted in having extra BNB. So you'd want to just look at like a little diagram in front of you that you have BNB and then you have the Binance Beacon chain and the Binance Smart chain, and those two chains talk to each other through a bridge. And let's just say the bridge is not secure as it needs to be. How about that?
There you go.
Okay, Tyler, I think Nicholas is in Rome now, because until now I still didn't get the answer. So I'll try to ask him. I don't think he can come in because he's in Rome, but I'll try to figure it out.
Apparently my answer wasn't good enough, Tyler.
Yeah, exactly. I still don't have the answer.
I literally ignore your other mod. Where's Cal, by the way? Is Cal ever going to come back, your original mod? Because he was always your original mod,
Careful,
Tyler.
if you say his name 3 times, he comes in. he listens.
I
I'm
was
gonna
just
start
going to
collecting
say
my
that he's
heels
like
because I
Candyman,
really
MA.
love to
You
see him
really
back
have to
on
be
set.
careful.
Yeah,
If you turn off the light and say his name 3 times, I guarantee you he'll present right behind you.
I'm gonna
he'll,
start. I swear to God, I'm gonna do that. He's gonna be
MA,
like my little deity.
here's what happens. He listens to the live stream, and then if people
Cal Patel, Cal Patel, Cal Patel.
say, careful,
There it is. There it is.
I give it 10 seconds.
And maybe
Uh,
we should start doing this with Michael too. Michael, Michael,
yeah.
Michael, Michael.
Okay. So the next big story is that in a filing, the judge in the Elon Musk Twitter trial, the judge grants Elon Musk's request to halt the trial and says that if the deal doesn't close by 5 p.m. on October 28th, the trial begins in November. Bloomberg says they have sources that the Musk Twitter talks are stuck on a debt financing issue. Musk wants to reserve the right to sue Twitter for allegedly misleading him about bot accounts. And Financial Times says in an interview with Elon Musk, it is quote unquote vaguely therapeutic to play the fool on Twitter. Musk said about how he uses Twitter. Truth Social is a right wing echo chamber that can be called Trumpet and more. Um, anyway, so someone did at Financial Times did a interview with Elon, and he talked about Twitter a little bit. And I have my own theory now about why Elon is um, deciding to ask for the trial to be dropped, and he's has a newfound desire to make the deal happen at the pre-agreed price. And I think it's
Hey,
because
Tyler,
yes,
I was just going to say, Tyler, why did, with everything going through almost without question, you made this point a few days ago that he potentially didn't want the embarrassment of being in court. Why would he accept the deal to move forward and then Twitter push back? I think it was late yesterday or midday yesterday. I was at a conference where, ironically, the chief product officer for Twitter bailed out at the last minute. I'm just trying to figure out, like, why would Twitter now push back
why is Twitter pushing back? Fill
on
that
the
in.
deal from Elon?
Meaning now Twitter's back to their old tricks of saying they don't want him to buy
That's what I heard late last night when I landed from SFO.
it. There, this is starting to seem like a funny high school romance almost.
Yes, exactly. That's what Twitter have been doing. I don't know what's going on in their mind. As I mentioned way before, when Elon kind of wanted to buy Twitter, I don't know what's going through Twitter people's mind. This back and forth ping pong. Now he decided, okay, I want to buy Twitter, and the Twitter people are not coming up or through. And it's not about the embarrassment of going to the trial, it's about waste of his time. That's entire waste of his time. He has better things to do than to just sit in a trial and waste all those hours. And if Twitter doesn't want this deal, then they should drop. If they want the deal, then just accept the deal and take the money and close. But what is this back and forth?
They've already accepted the deal. Shareholders have
Don't
approved
the
it. It's going forward.
shareholders have to, the shareholders have accepted the deal. So doesn't he have to do it now? I mean, doesn't Twitter have to do it now?
Yes.
Yes, or they get a penalty at this point.
Yeah. So I haven't heard that they said they don't want to get bought, but the shareholders have already approved the deal.
Well,
Twitter
and
and
it's a good
Elon,
deal. It's still a good deal.
yeah, Twitter and
It's
Elon
an
are like
amazing
Ross and
deal.
Rachel. It's a will they,
It's an
won't they?
extraordinary deal. They are getting so much more money for their shares, more than they are worth right now.
Okay, I think you're right. I think he certainly has better things to do, but I think it's also that during the discovery process of exposing tweets and emails and everything, he had some incredibly important emails that he probably can't risk being exposed even. So, and just there's certain details that are uh, too sensitive to risk being exposed as a result of this process, I imagine. Anywho,
Maybe the Twitter people don't want Jason as CEO.
this scared the living daylights out of them.
Just a just a question. That's
Yeah.
right.
What?
Yeah, but with respect to how much Elon is paying for it, now the stock has kind of recovered. So, from that perspective, it was at least nice to see that Twitter could rebound from all that drama. So, I'm not sure to what extent what Aram said is accurate, but it's like 48 versus 50. So, I think that's pretty close.
Yeah. I think that Twitter is an amazingly strong product given all the givens that it's been through. It's been mismanaged from the get go, and it has never ceased to be out of the headlines, and it's never ceased to be relevant. And it's almost 20 years old now.
You
And
know,
I think a
Well,
big part
not
of that is that Elon was on it, right? Elon, an influential person, an innovator, entrepreneur, was using Twitter in a very direct way. And then, I guess Trump saw that and was like, hey, I can do that too.
Well,
everybody
Patel is
uses
here,
Twitter.
Tyler.
I told you. I told you. I told you. He's Candyman.
yeah.
Oh my
Sorry,
God,
Cal.
Cal's here.
Well,
One of the
like
most best mods
Yeah,
that
no,
Tyler
I
you
just
has.
had to do that, right? I just
sound
had
so
to do that.
surprised, May.
Oh my God.
Cal, we miss
God,
It
is
you.
was
that
a,
you?
it was actually coincidental. I was listening, and I had to just do that because you said that, right? So,
Okay, so
just for fun, it's good.
Cal, I'm gonna
Cal,
try
that's a
something.
Friday
wrap.
Cal,
party, so you have to come. Yeah.
Fridays,
Cal, I'm gonna try
Fridays are good
something.
too.
But
I kind
Cal,
of join on Fridays.
it is one of
Yeah.
the biggest topics that we're discussing right now in tech in of the year, the Elon Musk Twitter thing, and I don't think we've heard your thoughts on it. So the floor is yours.
Well, my father's 95 years old. He doesn't give a shit about Twitter and who owns Twitter. Um, I'm being kind of cynical there, but I do think that he travels the world. He gets out there. I just think that yeah, it's going to be a big deal when he takes ownership, if he does take ownership. Um, but in the end of the day, it's a platform. There's a real world out there, and I think a lot of people spend too much time on social media and get totally wound up about it. It doesn't actually change large amounts of what's going on in the world, even though politically maybe it did in the past. There were all kinds of things that it was influential on. But I think we're in a very different era now. There are new platforms people go on. People are on Discord. People are on Telegram. People are on Clubhouse. They're in other places, and it's Twitter is useful and it's helpful. It's a town hall, but so I kind of I've kind of backed down a little bit in trying to worry too much about the precise impact of what's going to happen on ownership. But I'd say one thing on the negotiation, just to, like from a corporate perspective, he's he's still clearly negotiating, and he'll negotiate till the last day, and I admire that about the CEO that he is. I have huge amounts of respect for him. So I know it's not popular to be respectful of people that have done amazing things sometimes because of things they say, etc. But his achievements are just amazing, and I think he will negotiate till, was it 28 days now? I think he's got to get the deal done, or at least 28 days. He'll negotiate like crazy. He'll do all kinds of things. He'll pull um, anything he can to lower the price. But in the end, I think he'll end up owning it if he wants to, if he has to, and do something with it. Most likely, he'll take it private, is my view, and then he'll play around with it in the private world, which is a lot easier.
Do you
Anyway,
think that the decision to go private hinges on whether or not he's able to haggle the price down?
oh no, no, I haven't thought about that. No, that's not. I just think it'll go private, whatever. I think it's really, really hard for it to do all the things. If it's going to be a WeChat, which is kind of like a WeChat type thing, then you might as well go private. And there's so much innovation. He's going to fire so many people. He's going to get a whole bunch of new people in, and it doesn't mean he's going to fire them. He's just going to make them work hard, and then the people that are not working hard will leave. And then he'll do other things. He'll just do a whole bunch of stuff. But he has to do that privately, and so it's not being watched every day. It's not being monitored by every decision that he makes. Nobody cares what SpaceX is doing, like on a day-to-day basis, but everyone cares about what Tesla is doing every day by a day-to-day basis. So he's seen that, and I don't see why he wouldn't just figure out a way to keep it private as long as the cash flow is okay, pays the debt, and whatever else he wants to return on there. I don't know the full structure, but I think it would be just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant if he takes it private and then works it through. And a lot of people are going to shout and whine that some accountability has been lost because it's private. There's a large number of private companies in this world that control your destiny. You don't even realize which ones they are. So I don't think that's going to be a bad thing for Twitter. So anyway, but yeah, I didn't make any money out of it by buying it low and trying to arbitrage the sale, but some people did. I think if the deal goes through, they've made a lot of money, 65%, something like that, from the low to the high.
I, won- I wonder if he's thinking about maybe incorporating Twitter into Tesla's system as an interface, creating an ecosystem of sorts. If he were to go private, that would be a possibility. That it would sort of dovetail into Tesla's success and create a new space of engagement for Twitter users who are also Tesla drivers. That would be an interesting avenue to.
Yeah, I think payments. First thing, payments. Let's get this thing, let's get everyone verified who's basically a human being. Like, so screw this, one person's more important than another because they filled out the right form, or they're currently employed by a big company, or something, whatever the tick is. But just make everyone who's human and is ready to provide some ID in their country, which allows for huge amounts of I know Nicholas is not going to like this, but huge amounts of accountability of behavior to some extent, at least at a country level. The Indians can do what they want with that, and the Brits can do what they want with that. But anyway, so ID that may, and then people are real people. And once they're real people, they can put payments in. And once you have payments, you can get closer and closer to being something that you want to use for commerce. And if you want to do that, there's a whole bunch of things. But I think so. That's one side, like on the WeChat thing, and or a super app. But on the other hand, I will also say that recently I've used over the summer I used Grab quite a lot, and that's sort of like a super app in
Yeah.
Singapore and Asia. But
Yeah.
the challenge, I tell you, is that look at the valuation of Grab. I mean, it's not been doing that great, right? It's a public company, but it's been suffering quite a lot. There's been a lot of criticism recently. I've got some friends out in Singapore who are talking about how it's the surge pricing is going crazy over at least the F1, and then it's not going back to normal. And they're having, and obviously they're getting support from the government because it's like a state capitalist economy. But it's and I'm not saying that in a negative way. God, they achieve a lot with that premise, huge amounts compared to other countries. But what I'm saying is, Grab is, if that's the aspiration, it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely not something like that doesn't exist. And so Elon's right about that. But let's see if it's down there. But payments, I think it just gets into payments. I don't know if it's crypto or not crypto. I think people like Ame would understand that more, but we're more likely to guess that. I don't know. Whatever it makes it easier for people, I just, people want ease. Everyday people just want easy things, right?
Did anybody
I
hear
would
the
say
rumor that he wants to rename it Twizzler?
X.
That's
X.
an excellent joke.
Thank
I
you.
think it's just a Ming joke, yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
on that
That was
on that
perfect,
on
actually.
that on that topic. This is Matt. So I had a chance this week. I was up in San Francisco, and I spoke at the TechX forum for North America. But just a view, we had Twitter, we had Meta, we had a lot of the platform companies, and I moderated about a 5 hour session yesterday at the Santa Clara convention. And Cal, to your point around e-commerce, and Tyler, to the drum you've been beating for weeks, if not months, is that I did tee up the question. I said, you're sitting here monetizing people's private information, and I said, from a regulatory, and there was somebody from DC there as well, kind of nodding his head as I was speaking and moderating. Is this trend about B2C moving into B2B was apparent, and it was veiled. It wasn't transparent, but they were just talking about the amount of the lack of service that you get in the B2C world, and what support model you would need from a customer experience moving into the B2B model. The reason I say that is I think we understand inherently that an Airbnb or some of these platform companies at some point in time will need to move up into the B2B space. But Tyler, to the point this room has made over the several months, is they're absolutely moving into commerce. And so, Cal, to your point, maybe money's not the most important thing to Elon Musk. Profits is about having an inherently, single source of truth, or one person's version of truth, and that I believe it's e-commerce. So for everybody other than Twitter, they need to move from monetizing people's information and data, as we've all experienced on certain platforms, to social commerce, so social media to social commerce. That is definitely something that we've talked about in this room, and every single Silicon Valley, not to talk about things in tech news around the world that's just happening in the Valley, but these platform companies, which were kind of born in the cloud, they're absolutely moving into social commerce to where they need to monetize their platforms on actual goods and services. So that starts to ask the question: okay, what happens to Amazon? What happens to Walmart.com? Retail CPG, Target, et cetera. But that definitely was the theme of how the platform companies are thinking about the future of their identity moving forward. And at some point in time, to Nicholas's passion, and Cal, your point, we need source identity. We need to know who's on there and who's paying for this, and then what are they paying for? Well, they're gonna have to pay for something, because we can't let these platforms monetize, your data, because that's been a failed errand to date. And we've seen people, like you said, Cal, move to other platforms, whether it's Clubhouse, whether it's, name the list. But it's very long, and Meta and other companies are suffering as a result. So that's just kind of a recap of the last 2.5 days of the tech conference in San Francisco.
He's never used Spaces, right? So sorry to take it off, Matt. Elon, has he ever used Twitter Spaces? Right? He's never
Not that I'm
to
aware.
communicate, to talk, to do anything, right?
No,
There are
just
people in this room that are smarter than me on that, but I know that Meta did abandon communities, which is kind of interesting, because I thought, it's a different, it's their version of Spaces, but maybe not a one-to-one comparison. But Meta, let's call it Facebook, they ditched obviously crypto and Lyra, but they got out of the community spaces, and I don't know if that was a scale motion, or I can't aggregate them, or they don't trust me, or my platform. But to your specific question, no, I have not heard anything
In
about
one swoop
amplifying
move,
spaces.
Musk can basically, he wouldn't do it because he doesn't, like, it's not even on his radar. It's like
Hmm.
it's a little speck, which is basically Clubhouse. And I don't mean to say this, I know you guys all love
Yeah.
Clubhouse, but it's a little speck, like it's a little thing on the side, right? But in one move, if social audio was a big deal, he could just drive all the he could drive traffic,
So
he
true.
could just start speaking on it, get his friends to speak on it, and they'll all come. I mean, the entire uh, uh, the entire, like, there's like a whole bunch of groupies, right? Like,
Hmm.
and like Jason and David Sachs, and just a whole bunch of groupies, like very smart groupies. They're not normal groupies, they're very, very smart groupies, but they're Elon groupies, right? And so you've got that entire world that will come in, and then he can get celebrities coming in. He can, but obviously he hasn't, like, even leveraged that. And once you get things like uh, everything Tyler's talked about for 2 years, about when you get a search in audio, when you get audio to sell things, right? And then you can add audio, you can add video to it. He can make it a more
Hmm.
animated space, right?
Hmm.
Really, really animated space. And it's not gonna. He doesn't have to do too much for that, right? That's the big card he's got. He can add like a 20 billion valuation with e-commerce and music and a whole
Yeah.
bunch of things. And he can drive traffic. He's uniquely positioned to kind of inject it, at least to start and catalyze the traffic and everything that goes with the amount of attention he gets, right, on anything he does. So he can move away from the politics and move to the commerce for like 20 days, 30 days,
Hmm.
and this thing would have a 20 billion valuation kick, right? I mean, but valuation is all future value, right? So it's interesting.
Well, I think the thing that we've all talked about on this call too is the clues are everywhere. Like we know what he wants to do, right? So if we back up and go a year or two ago, he wants to bypass the carriers, right? With space, he wants to, at some point in time, enable driverless cars. He wants the cars to be in a certain radius to create a cellular network so he can again bypass the carriers. He wants a platform where free speech is maintained. This is not an endorsement for him or a way, but as we look and study the technology, the clues are everywhere. We've been talking about it for everywhere, and it's all public. It's less of the what, it's more of the when he's going to do it. And I think that's why we've been kind of watching this Wimbledon match, left, right, like, is he going to do it? They're in, the shareholders in, they're out, they're, court dates. So I think it's less of, we know his intentions. We know what he wants to do. The question is, when will he want to do it? And
Yeah,
that's
he'll do
the,
nothing. Obviously, this is an obvious statement of the year. He'll do
yep,
absolutely nothing with Twitter that will add value to Twitter until he owns it. Okay,
exactly.
and
Yep.
then he'll go crazy.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to see
months
him do his
ago,
interviews. Like every interview he does, it would be on the condition that it be in a Twitter space, and watch out when that happens. I
Exactly.
I still think
Twitter
it's. Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry. So months ago, when I attended the Gigafactory opening and the cyber rodeo, where Elon and everybody else spoke, uh, very clearly he mentioned what he wants to do with Twitter. Also, later on, in many other discussions, he mentioned what are the plans for future, how Twitter incorporate in the future mission of Tesla, the environmental factors that he wants to make sure that the world survives, and reducing the carbon footprint in many different ways. And Twitter is part of that entire puzzle. The electric cars, the solar panel generated energy, the Optimus robot, the Starlink satellites, the boring tunnels, the list go on and on. SpaceX reusable rockets. I mean, there's a long list of things that are coming down the lane now. Lithium cleaning, and I mean, it's such a long list. I can't go on for all of it, but the mission is very clear, and also the tools that are required are also identified, and those tools either are going to be acquired or recreated. So, whatever brings the expeditious, efficient way of promoting that mission. That's very clear out there. Second point is months ago, I said that he wants Twitter, he's going to get it. It doesn't matter when and how, and the price is there. He is negotiating. That's the point I made months ago. Third aspect is spaces don't need Elon at all. Even like, we hold Twitter spaces, the Tesla community, all the time. Even one retweet of Omar, who's like, we have Tesla celebs who hold Twitter spaces. So just a retweet or a like by Elon is enough to blow up that space. And trust me, past, so many times, that's what happens. If he retweets somebody's tweet, that's enough to have hundreds of thousands of people coming in, or retweeting and resharing that share, or just being on that space talking about what Elon just said is enough for people to come in. So he doesn't even have to hold his own spaces. Just one heart emoji or a comment is enough. So his time is really valuable. Nobody, not the shareholders, nobody want him to waste his time. There are people standing behind him, people from SpaceX who want to contribute. He doesn't have to go for the monetary issues at all, there is no problem there either. People from SpaceX don't want him to get distracted or have any kind of problem in the future mission, and they are there to solve all these issues. So there is this sentiment. I'm not sure the future of Twitter is going to be so different than any of us can imagine right now. And the monetary bit, like people were making these memes and jokes about Dogecoin is going to be the currency for Twitter. It doesn't matter. Whatever currency they choose, it's going to provide a platform for direct communication authentically, plus the monetary exchange that can happen around the globe, plus the data that is collected that can be then incorporated and used for Optimus and for FSD and furthermore. So this is a deal that's going to help not only Tesla and SpaceX and Elon Musk, but all the investors too. And yesterday in a meeting, yes, some of the financial people are not happy at the price point, and that is the problem. They want the price to go down, and that's what it's all about. I think in the end, if the price can't go down, they're going to go with it anyway, but they will try their best to get the price point a little bit lower than what it is right now.
Okay, now we go into the next topic. Internal memos say that Meta's.
Tyler, are you there?
Oh shit!
I think
Sorry. Oh damn. Sorry, I was on mute.
you're muted.
So on to the next topic. In an internal memo over at Facebook, Meta's VP of Metaverse says that Horizon Worlds is suffering from too many quality issues, and even the team building the app isn't using it very much. Meta's VR social network Horizon Worlds, the company's flagship metaverse app, is suffering from too many quality issues, according to the boss of that project. And Kashmir Hill from the New York Times says, a look at life in Meta's VR-based social network Horizon Worlds, interacting with early adopters, including preteens, parents, insomniacs, and aspiring comedians. So you can read Kashmir Hill's review
Welcome to the VR world.
of Facebook's app there. The next is from Bloomberg. Amazon stops working on Scout, its autonomous cooler-sized home delivery robot, which it's been testing since 2019. According to sources, about 400 people were working on the project globally, and now they're shutting it down. And for those who don't recall, this is Amazon's blatant ripoff of Starship Technologies, the Estonian company that pioneered this incredibly cute little sidewalk roaming robot, which the lid pops off, and you can send about a normal grocery bag's worth of stuff. And the question is, why are they stopping it? Well, I have ideas, which is, as I said the last time we talked about this topic, is this is not going to work in the U.S. in the current state of things in the U.S. because it's a bit of a lawless wasteland developing, and these things will work fine in Scandinavia, and it'll work fine in much of Asia. Certainly Japan, it will work flawlessly in Japan. But when you have people stealing Amazon products off of people's porches, the robot roaming down the street that's carrying an Amazon package is basically, begging for it. So, yeah, I guess I'm assuming this is I'm creating a conspiracy theory here that Amazon is scuttling this project because the theft rates on this thing have gone up since it's started, and more recently. I think people now have gone open season on these things, and so they have to pull the e-brake on it. Just a hunch.
It makes sense, Tyler, because if you think about it, like they do these experiments, right? That's one thing that we just, I always say this about Amazon, and I say this about Elon too, is that they're strategists. You know, where they're putting experiments in place and then getting connections and then scaling the connections, right? Which is a very, very hard thing to compete against. And a lot of people are very top-down strategy thinkers, right? So they think that everyone's figured out like a linear path, like this is a future, and then these 5 things I'm going to build, like a China 5-year plan. Even the China 5-year plan is emergent. They put principles in place, and then things happen, and then they connect things. This is what Amazon does, right? So they put all these experiments out there. This was one key experiment, and they're trying to understand, how it works and how it works in different countries. So Tyler, you're definitely right. I think what they probably are looking at this and going, and again, doesn't mean that they won't bring it back again. That's the other thing. People, it's all timing, right? If you're in a corporate thing, you've got a pipeline of stuff. You pull it back because this is not where you're going to put your effort this year in this country, right? They may be continuing in the UK. I think I heard Ben talking about some experiment just like that on a replay a number of weeks ago in the UK, I think in Milton Keynes or something, which have basically US type roads, right? But I won't survive on the crime there, I don't think. But Singapore, it would work, but it's a small market. What are you going to do with 5 million, 6 million people, right? You need this to work in big cities, in the US, big market, and some Asian countries that are big markets. Maybe Japan is big enough, but you're not going to build your entire business based on a Japanese market as your total market, right? So I think that could be a good thesis, Tyler. But they could bring it back again, right? And then there's new technologies that might emerge that makes it viable later, right? So
Just to add a
So
pepper
Cal,
spray,
we
a pepper spray gun on the front of the thing.
We in
yes,
the opposite's happening locally though, Cal. You should come visit sometime. I spent an hour and a half looking at these bloody things up the road, not in Milton Keynes, but in a very normal like village small town local to me. And it's been so successful there that the co-op are rolling it out in many other places locally as well. So they've got dozens of these things doing their job. The kids get on well with them. The adults get on well with them. They're completely autonomous. I never saw a human intervene except for the lady at the shop, or lady or man at the shop, load it and then the customer unload it. And they're quite remarkable to watch. So certainly in this neck
that
of the
makes sense.
woods,
And
it's working.
in a UK village system, right? You have, and this is very interesting about how trust and crime works, right? We found that it was way back, right? So I go back. I know I always bring up an old story from my favorite company, but way back we were working with Magic Johnson, who was a basketball player in the US. And we did a collaboration. It was something I was driving out collaborations of getting Best Buys into the roughest areas, right, into the worst, like criminal, like the idea that this place is rough because it's poor or it's got high crime rates, and we were trying to get at least I was trying to get the Best Buys into those areas because I saw the markets as being quite phenomenally large potentially, and so we did a collaboration and put them in Compton, in LA, and a bunch of other places. And what you found is that when you had a community that actually cared about each other enough, and they knew each other, they physically knew each other, they had eye contact and they knew each other, you could put in things that generally speaking were more trusted, and you could do that. And the UK village, you could argue that, right? Because you've got, right, Ben, that's maybe one of the phenomena if you're seeing it in villages, right?
Yeah,
And,
well, this is a place called Camborne. It's not really, we call it, the nickname for it is Crimeborne, to give you a clue.
oh
So it's
wow,
not really
wow,
a village, it's a new
that's phenomenal.
village.
Yeah.
And it's working, it's there that it's working really well. So it's not like a sleepy British village. This is a brand new, relatively new place. And again, the nickname's Crimeborne. So, and it's working fine there, just FYI.
Oh, that's good. Is that an Amazon thing or is it something else?
No, co-op.
Co-op. Oh yeah. And they've used some other technology from some other
Oh,
company.
yeah. It'll
Yeah,
be
yeah,
Yeah.
100% outsourced,
yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah.
Ben, is it being tested in that place?
Well, they're just using it. I mean, I can find you an article. Give me a second.
Here's my point: is
Um,
it might be the case that they intentionally are piloting this stuff in high crime areas because they want to get down to figure out they knew at the concept at the embryonic stage that that's the real question, And so we might as well take it to the high crime places now to see if they're actually going to how this will work.
If anybody's here from Cambourne, I don't want to call Cambourne a high crime place. It's slightly higher than perhaps the average around the area. It's still nationally pretty low, I would have thought, and globally, definitely not up there with some of the worst places. This is a nice enough, safe enough place, but
But I
you
have a
can see.
question.
I put a link in the chat, and you can see the
Yeah.
place. You can see the robots. They're made by a company called Starship, but they are quite remarkable. You stand in front of them, they just kind of stop for a second, then try and go around you. And if you're a total tit and try and stay in the way, then they speak to you and say, "Excuse me, you're going to make me late for my delivery. Would you mind moving?" And a robot speaks to you. And I don't think they very often need any human intervention. The article I've posted in the chat shows lots of videos and photos of them.
But Tyler, question from experience going around the world, right? Don't you think that this will work in most first world developed countries? Even China, because of the degree of law enforcement, things will work there too for this kind of
It'll work fine in
kind of
China, yeah.
delivery. But why is it only America is supposed to be a developed country, but you at the beginning when you first started, you already know that it's not going to work because of
Right.
the nature of the
Yep.
people there.
Yeah, that's because
So
Amazon will see China as a big market, Cheryl. There's not a doubt about that. Every US company would see it as a big market. But mark my words, they're all exiting China. They are not, the geopolitical risk in China is not worth putting that on any business case. It will not survive an internal committee. And that's the
Right.
problem, right? It's a big market. Now, Japan might, and obviously, I don't know all the other Asian companies in countries in terms of how this kind of stuff would work. I definitely know it would work in Singapore. It'd be like clockwork. It would but it's not a big enough market. But China is the big challenge with every single business case inside these large companies. I'm helping a large U.S. retailer uh, trying to figure out what they do with their investments in certain countries. And it's very clear they cannot move past the first committee, second committee, third committee on any form of risk analysis, rightly or wrongly. I'm not getting into a geopolitical argument here, even though I think they're right. We made a decision 10 years ago at Best Buy to exit our investments out of China. It was very unpopular at the time. Other retailers took over some of our businesses, saying that they were going to make it work. I remember having meetings with them saying, it's if you're here for 10 years, that's going to be tough. And because you could see the signs, you could literally see the signs in terms of how the local businesses were given support, etc. So China's a really, really tough market for Amazon to build a business case off. But yes, it'll work, and the Chinese government and Chinese companies will use this. It'll be all over China way before anywhere else if it's a good proposition. And of course, if nobody's going to do anything because you might get your fingers chopped off, right? So it's just one of those things, right?
Okay. Next topic. Meta warns 1 million Facebook users that their account information may have been stolen by more than 400 apps, often via the login with Facebook button. So apps that use the login with Facebook button are stealing your Facebook data, basically. And now they're warning the users about that because they don't want to get themselves in a class action lawsuit about data theft. So
So
some
they are
people,
done making money out of that button now and trying to move away from the legal implication that may, come or arise in response to the money they have made by selling the data of people. Or was it they didn't even know this was happening? How's that possible?
they did know previously they wouldn't be responsible. There's new laws that have come out since this technology started that make them more liable for data sharing of this type. So now they have to, the lawyers came in and said, here's what we need to do to protect our asses due to these new regulations about user data sharing. So we have to say that we warned them, that they know it's on them, that they're now liable and responsible for their own data. So yeah, I imagine it's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Next topic: EU regulators sent game developers about 100 questions about Microsoft Activision acquisition. I think I know why. Including whether Activision's games may be blocked from rivals. So what's going on here is the EU is trying to figure out, should we be blocking this Microsoft's acquisition of Activision? And they don't know if they should or not, because a lot of people in the gaming community are like, why are you trying to block that? I'm sure there's some people in the game community that are encouraging them to block it, but I'm sure there's lots who aren't. And they, as the politicians, don't really know if they should or not. I think it's weird. I would love to know why they even decided that this was what they were told, because they don't know. This is not their. They don't know what Activision really does or what Microsoft really does or the landscape of video games. If you think, you know, high level policymakers have a clue what's going on in the gaming industry, you're kidding yourself. So, yeah, why are they doing it? Good on them. I applaud them for interviewing people in the industry to find out what they want. Should we waste your tax dollars to do this? Is this what you want us to do? Is this the right thing to do? And interview the industry and figure out what people, your constituents, actually really want. I applaud it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, maybe do that first before saying you're going to, try to impede this deal. Anyways, the
Well,
next is yes.
Do you want to comment on that, Tyler?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think there's a couple different aspects to that, and this is all publicly available information, but this has started a long time ago, and I welcome other thoughts on this. There's first of all, the EU is going to be probably the first to act on, like they do on GDPR and privacy and all that stuff. And from a competitive perspective, I'm sure that there are people that sit in the Google Play camp, or the App Store camp, and I think there is a potential challenge. I wouldn't say a threat to them, but a potential challenge in the market, that those have been the only two places where you can onboard new games. And with this pending acquisition, I think there is perceived not domination, but there's perceived anti-competitive behavior that would take place, because if that merger were to go through, you can bypass some of the apps. So that's issue number one. Number two, the developer community, the bar is very high for them to develop. Very high for them to develop, for the developers of some of these games or apps, is very high for them to get an app, insert a game into all of our lives. And so I believe, and this is not a Microsoft point of view, this is a market point of view, is that there's a lot of upcoming technology with GitHub and other developer tools, and that bar is being lowered because you have things like natural language processing, which can speed up the delivery of apps. So I think what they're doing is they're trying to get, and rightfully so, I agree with you, that they should be getting ahead of this and say, okay, with all these changing things on item number one, number two, and NLP like Copilot, all these things for you to develop apps and use cases, is this going to be a bigger threat to the two monoliths, or companies that have access to the App Store today? Number one, can you bypass the traditional app stores, whether it's Google Play or Apple? Number one. Number two, will we see a velocity of new developers? And number three, what is the monetization model? What am I going to get paid for developing a new app? Will it be better with Microsoft? Will it be worse? Will it be equivalent to Apple and Google? So I think that's the thing that even the people that are in the industry don't really know yet. But what I would predict is that you're going to see a lot more developers make a lot more money, and right now they want to be paid for their development tools or apps or games. And right now, I think there's a belief that from a developer point of view, that they're not being paid fairly. So I think there's a confluence of different things that are happening, and it's all landing on how do we regulate or not regulate, approve or deny this acquisition.
There you go. Right from Microsoft spokesperson. I'm joking.
Mark, yeah, I'm the tech. Honestly, I'm tech for good, so I don't have a dog in the hunt. If I did, I wouldn't be on this podcast. So thanks for giving me a floor. And I welcome challenges because there are people in this room that are way smarter than me. But I'd love to hear other people's opinions, or we'll just move on.
I just would simply, that was brilliant the way you laid it out, man. I would just add the word discovery. The app, how app or game discovered is one of the very short list
Hmm.
issues that really brings all these app stores kind of into question, and they're kind of working through it again.
I agree. I agree.
I thought the whole point was Xbox Game Pass was a way for them to show that this generation and the next generation, hey, for $1 a month or a few dollars a month, you can have all these games, but you can't have those games on PlayStation. So I thought that was kind of and they had no intention of like stopping selling Call of Duty, for example, for PlayStation, because that wouldn't make sense. You would antagonize part of the market. So I thought it was just, hey, that's great, you love the game, we give it to you as well. But over here, look how awesome it is. So I thought that's definitely a great deal. And if anyone hasn't looked at it, the Game Pass has lots and lots of games. So it's
Well,
definitely a
no,
real value deal.
yeah, and I would add maybe I don't know if it's two, or I'll add a third or a fourth or 2.5 or third, is that there also is going to be, whether we are definitely in the hype cycle of the metaverse for sure, but I think these B2C apps are going to move into B2B apps. We've already started to see that happen with like Meta moving some of their collaboration tools in with Salesforce. Number one, that was, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago. And so you're going to see slowly over time this gamification of your CRM tools, of your team's collaboration tools. You will see more immersive experiences. I'm not an Avatar fan for one. I think they're going to get better, but like this whole metaverse, I would just call it immersive experiences. I'd rip and replace metaverse with immersive experiences, and I don't believe in walled gardens, but I think we probably need to start steering away from the metaverse. But these more immersive experiences, like we doubted in Web 2 and we were in Web 1. Like I can't imagine that, right? Read, write, and now we've got immersive experiences. So part of that gaming thing, we look at Activision Blizzard as just a gamers market in the consumer space. I think it's going to move up into the B2B space very, very carefully. And this is going to be all to enhance the employees, the customer work experiences, because now just looking at somebody through a Zoom or a Teams or GoToMeeting or a WebEx call, that's like literally version 0.00001. And we know that we need to do that to retain talent, to onboard new employees and have a different customer experience from an e-commerce perspective, that when you bring up your profile, you don't have to, go through all these call trees. So I know I'm getting deep into the weeds on that third point, but this whole gamification is going to move its way into not Call of Duty as I go to work, nothing like that. But there's going to be aspects of the app community, the developer community, that want to be in the enterprise space. Why? Because you can monetize that. That subscription based consumer is also, but it's also very, very, it's 1,000 paper cuts to get a consumer. If you have a generative use case in the enterprise and you can change the working experience, the employee experience, that's really the pot of gold and the use cases that I think this merge is all about. Thanks, Tyler.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Matt,
totally agree with you. Sorry, Tyler, one more just on this. Matt, one thing, I think that's where the money is in gaming. I mean, just recently, I've seen that the big consulting companies, Accenture, um, Infosys, the Indian even the Indian companies, all of them, a significant chunk of their training is now moving into using games to help them, right? All kinds of
Hmm.
games, uh, uh, scenarios of situations, but some of them are not even that directly related to, like, it's not like a work situation game. It's just a game, but it's got inbuilt skill analysis and building in some cases. So right now, by the way, for example, anybody, and this is not a small proportion of young people in the United States and the rest of the world, of course, who want to go to McKinsey. McKinsey's first entry point is a game, right?
Hmm.
And it's a game. It's a scenario. It's a game. It very easily will move into the metaverse in about a year, 2 years. Not
Yep.
metaverse.
Yep.
It'll be more immersive, right? I don't mean to
Yep.
use that word, but it's going to be more immersive. And you don't realize that they're testing anything, right, on this game. It's just a game, right?
Right.
It's built by this company called Ibulus or something, right? But literally every single person that wants to join that company has to do that game, and then you move to the next stage, right? And that's
Yep.
and so and there's a lot of money in that, right? That's just huge amounts of money. So you're dead on. I can see where the profit pools on this are, and it's also the training and the while I know that Best Buy is using it for training
Hmm.
purposes. A lot of gaming now, huge amounts of gaming for computer train, like helping people get better skills to repair computers and technology, but also how do you treat patients online, which in the medical business, etc. And they're using some form of gaming, and it'll become more immersive. So it's not all directly there yet, but it'll become more immersive and 3D in a sense. So I anecdotally I can see that. I wonder what the numbers are today. Like 1% of training is done, 20% is training. I wonder what that is. And once those numbers come out, I think it's just a question of saying, if you move from 5% of all training done, through games or immersive experiences to 50%, then you just see all the effort going in there, right? And Microsoft will be sitting there like pretty on that.
Well, and I think the way it's going to end, I'm sure we need to move on with Cheryl and Tyler here, but it's not going to happen in a linear fashion. So it's going to that percentage, which is a great way to measure it. It's not going to happen directly through gaming. So the way they're going to onboard is they're going to start with different consumer experiences. So let's say new hire onboarding or customer experience or employee experience. It's already moved from training, which is like you would just pull you'd want to stick a fork in your eye, to Netflix. So now all training on board, new hire, whatever compliance training, it looks like Netflix at Microsoft and others, right? I'm not giving anything away, but so they're trying to have that consumer feel that you had, in general or during the pandemic. That all the training now looks like Netflix. It's all scenarios. It's it's just I can't explain it. I can't compare it to House of Cards because that would be a horrible experience, metaphor. But or Breaking Bad, that'd be even worse. But like it's Netflix. Okay, so they're going to take it from what do you know? Okay, especially if you're in a different demographic, you're 40 or 50 or whatever, we're going to push you to Netflix, and then from there we're going to gamify it, and then so it's going to some depending on your organization, it will be a gamify where you're scoring points or whatever. Other demographics, the approach is going to be Netflix, and then they're going to tabulate that and make it more fun and more engaging. I think we're 1 to 2 years away from that, maybe 3 years away from more like what we would coin metaverse experiences. But you're dead on, Cal. That's exactly how it's going to happen. It's just not going to be linear. They're going to look at how do you consume today, your demographic. How did you consume in the past, and then how do you think we can consume in the future that ties those demographics together? So that's sort of the playbook that's out there right now across all
I,
organizations.
this resonates with me so much. This has been like my career for the last 3 decades. When I was at Stanford Business School, one of my papers was on human interface technologies. So all I'd like to say, my point is, this can take a lot longer than people think. But game technology is, in my opinion, has been the main driver in tech. Quite frankly, you guys are providing so many great examples. But 2 little data points. One, I think it was Magic Leap announced, was it last week? Their new refreshed AR glasses are $3,300. So when people are saying, "Oh yeah, AR in the consumer market," oh hell no. I mean, I have friends that work at Meta on these types of projects, and they're tough to do, y'all, on the consumer side to get the right price point and things. So, but in the enterprise, hell yeah, games been on for that for quite a couple of decades. Um, Training military, a buddy of mine working on systems to train NFL players, skill assessment, things like Cal's speaking to. And it's kind of funny that this topic came up because today I'm going to the Atari's 50th reunion here in the Bay Area. So some of these things can take a long time, but yeah, games are the catalyst
Is that the
for.
50th employee? Is that employee reunion?
It's
You,
the
you,
50th from the founding,
yeah.
but everybody,
You used
everybody
to
who's
work there, right? You used to work
yeah,
there.
Atari games. So everybody who's alive has been made aware of it. But
Some
yeah,
leg,
that's
some some legacy people on this stage sometimes. It's good. It's good to see that. Like
yeah. It's
that's big stuff. Atari.
Yeah, it's the coin op, right? The coin op Atari. That was the I was fortunate to work there after business school for a number of years, but had already been around for 20 years before I even got there. So yeah, games lead tech is what I've been seeing over decades. But thanks for letting me share thoughts. Everybody have a great weekend.
Great weekend.
Okay, so the next topic is the Google announcement of the Pixel 7 Pro and all the new devices that they did at their event yesterday with the Google Pixel Watch and the Google Pixel tablet and the earbuds and a whole bunch of hardware that all work nicely together. And a lot of people have made the comment that a lot of the features they were highlighting are kind of catching up to what Apple announced at their event in September with image stabilization and such. Anyone with a thought on Google's hardware
So are
ambitions?
you converted? Are you going to change to Google Pixel?
I can't. I won't know until I can do a side by side comparison with the the Pixel 7 Pro, and my iPhone Pro Max, and test the camera side by side. So I have to wait for
So,
that.
Basically, you're saying
Tyler,
you
how
you
good
won't
is the
convert. That's what you're saying.
I think so too, because it's difficult to step out of the Apple world if you are, surrounded by Apple products. I don't know how good Google is going to seamlessly patch in that Google, ecosystem is totally different than um, Apple's ecosystem. So I'm not sure. Are you willing to change everything? Your headphones, your laptops, iPad, everything.
I don't know that that's really the case that I would need to do that. I kind of like the idea that my laptop is uh, Mac and my phone is Android in a way, but
Listen,
we'll see.
anyone from Google listening, please, anybody, whatever level you are in that organization, you need to go to somebody in your marketing group or somebody somewhere at Google, get the full pack to Tyler, right? Get it shipped to him in Thailand. Get the full, everything, like the full highest end, fully stacked up, highest processing power, everything. And then he can go through the journey of him comparing it to his existing platform on this platform, and it will help you out one way or the other, right? So anybody from Google, honestly, you'll get promoted if you're just a new intern or something. You'll get promoted. Take that idea to somebody really cool in marketing, and it'll happen. So anyway, get Tyler the full pack, like full
Hell
on.
yeah.
That,
Okay, Cal, what about Tyler tries it and then decides, no, I don't like Google?
It'll still work. It'll be a lot of publicity. There'll be talk, and Tyler's going to do it properly, right? He's not going to trash them, or maybe he will, but
it's
but yeah,
You
I
you
can.
know he will.
Here's the thing.
If
I really
Tyler doesn't like it, he'll be like, "Oh God, that was just such a waste of my time."
but that can be user feedback, right? They can use that. I mean, honestly, as an intern or anyone out there, because there are a lot of people listen to this. I know young people listen to it, others do. Like, it's a good idea. You will find it's an interesting idea. Just take it, and then if you're in marketing at Google, that's a nice little thing you can take forward and build on it in your career. So there you go.
okay. According to sources, Crypto.com saw a 30 to 40% reduction in the head count between June and August, with more than 2,000 employees leaving the company. Samsung says its Q3 profit likely dropped 31.7% in year over year to 7.7 billion, but it was estimated to that revenue was going to increase 2.7. So that that's not good. That's a really bad Q3 for Samsung. AMD announces about 5.6 billion in Q3 revenue, below its outlook of 6.7 billion. So again, AMD and Samsung, those are the two of the big chip makers, both having bad Q3s. Not terribly surprising now that we're not all buying gadgets endlessly during COVID, and we're all out doing things again. Jico, a neobank that gives companies Low-cost access to short-term U.S. Treasury bills raises $40 million. We went through all the Google announcements, and according to Reuters, they have sources that the U.S. plans to spare SK Hynix and Samsung from the brunt of new restrictions on selling memory chips in China. So Samsung and SK Hynix will not be restricted from selling memory to China, apparently. And this new U.S. restrictions is due to come out this week. That's pretty big. And I imagine if Samsung, who sells a lot of memory to Chinese smartphone manufacturers, like a lot. So Samsung is one of the biggest memory sellers in the world, if not the biggest. And the Chinese smartphones are the biggest buyers of that memory. So I can imagine that became a national issue instantly, that Samsung knew this was coming, went to their parliament, said, you must call America right now and carve out an exemption for us, or they're already having a bad quarter. We just read the announcement. That would just be a potentially unrecoverable kneecapping if the U.S. were to say, sorry, Samsung, you can't sell memory chips to China anymore. But there's another interesting point to this article, which is the U.S. continues to escalate, exacerbate, cut off, kibosh, kill the bridge, burn all the bridges between itself and its allies and China. And so why shouldn't a memory chip, it's just for storing data, kilobytes and megabytes and gigabytes and petabytes in devices. It's just memory. Why shouldn't they be able to sell memory to China? There's no real strategic advantage there, is there? Well, it's remember how I said the U.S. was going to try and do to China what it did to Russia with all of these sanctions that Russia is now under, that is, hurting Russia.
Now they're
Despite,
stealing washing machines for microchips.
well, you might recall how I mentioned the U.S. has ambitions to put China in a similar situation, and it is doing that, but it's doing that not through the same sort of process. They're just banning technologies because that's the main issue with China. They're stealing all this stuff, and we don't want them. We want to keep them in 2022, like Cuba's in 1957. And I can see why this could continue, and it will continue and continue until we feel like China is no longer a threat. It is what it is. New York Times reporting on a Pew survey or study that reveals that 6% of U.S. adults regularly get news on something called BitChute and Gab and Getter and Parler and Rumble and Telegram or Truth Social. But no one particular site drew over 2% from people seeking news. So I think the thing those things have in common is this from the quote unquote right in the U.S. Certainly Parler and Rumble and Truth Social are. I imagine Telegram's a bit more neutral, and I really don't know about BitChute and Gab and Getter. Getter is right leaning, so these, I assume the connective thread here is that these are right leaning platforms, and Pew has revealed that 6% of U.S. adults regularly get their news from them. There you go. Next is from Bloomberg. The National Labor Relations Board complains that the Alphabet Workers Union over there at Google says some contract workers were fired for supporting a union or faced retaliation after pushing for better benefits. Shopify settles a lawsuit with 5 major education publishers that claimed the platform ignored notices of users selling pirated textbooks and other materials. Interesting. So I imagine does Amazon, for example, make sure that people aren't selling textbooks, educational textbooks that are pirated or what have you? Next up from Axios, 6 robotics companies, including Boston Dynamics, pledge not to support the weaponization of their products and say adding weapons will erode trust in robots. At least for now, until the Department of Defense breaks out the big checkbook. Yeah, it's all in their interest. Yeah,
When that $1 billion contract arrives.
yeah. Just wait till that $1 billion contract shows up, and then you know what? After all, there's a lot of bad guys in the world, and it's our responsibility to do something about it. And it'll save lives. And the U.S. won't have to spend so much on the military anymore because we can put robotic dogs out there, and we're going to save lives. We're going to save America's biggest single expense, which is military, and we're doing the right thing. Pat us on the back.
Oh, they'll just put a board together, an ethics board, and they'll find the right ethics people that can, put the argument forward, right? Which
Right.
is saving lives. We're only going to kill robots now. Yeah, you just got to get the right board together. It's here in Oxford, which is supposed to be a philosophy like capital of the world, if you like. You can get any perspective agreed to by 2 professors over a dinner party, right? They will make a justification for China's current position in China and what they're doing with some of their people. They'll make a position for Singapore. They'll make a position for U.S. And guns, and they'll do it. You can find all the philosophers and you can put them in a committee. I'm not being cynical about corporates, but generally speaking, that's kind of like how they'll do it. And then the $2 billion contract will justify it all. They'll pay people well. They'll hire people. They'll hire minorities. They'll do initiatives at universities. They'll do all those things that will give them, the superficial sense of what they're doing, but they'll do it. The money will drive the game, and not just the money, also the current challenge of getting people to do stuff, right? Whether it's going to be now weaponization is a whole different thing, but anywhere on robotics, that's kind of where I see this going. I see even like 3 robotic startups here in Oxford that have got philosophers on their like committees, etc. From Oxford, so they kind of put these people on, and then they come in. It's Oxford, everyone respects them. They kind of do that, and effectively they justify, Ocado, firing people to put these robots in, right? So no problem, we're okay. The executives feel good about it, and the PR goes out there. So I just see like nothing is going to stop robots. Nothing. I wish I could find like some way to say that there's going to be we're going to have ethical arguments that say that's good for the world, and for weaponization, I don't see. It's just money. It's just money, right? And you're dead right, Tyler. I think it's not going to take long. So they can say what they want, right? They're just
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, we're
exactly.
all going to pledge." What are they pledging?
Right. They're going to get acquired. They're pledging not to do it unless they get acquired. The next topic here is
Tyler, they can
target.
also just supply the robot without the weapon in its actual hand. So
Of
they can make a
course,
robot that is ready to interface with any weapon you choose,
with a
made to
very
order, but you just don't
simple
provide the
device.
actual weapon.
Yeah, but they're going to charge a real premium for that adapter kit to mount the.
It'll be a
So
$5,000
And
adapter rail.
yeah,
I believe Boston Dynamics has also received a lot of money from DARPA and the military as well.
There's quite a few videos of Boston Dynamics robots in camo for my for my liking.
Oh yeah, the one walking around like Terminator. That one was creepy from a few years ago. And then you see the same robot now doing like backflips and stuff. So it's pretty crazy.
Yep.
I can't. A world where that doesn't become like a robot. Already at the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, there are automated turrets that do not require an operator. So I think that part of the world is already developed, and that's Samsung turrets made by Samsung. So it's
With regards to that robot, you can be sure he'll be back.
Again, how long before? Because there are Chinese knockoffs of the Boston Dynamics dog robot, right? I think even Huawei makes one for about $1,000, if I recall the headline. Now, how difficult? I know the answer, but it's worth asking. No one's ever asked it. Technically, how difficult is it to rig an Uzi or something that doesn't have a lot of kickback in terms of ammunition that could somebody could rig one of these up in their workshop, for example? So you would need uh, a camera or have access to the camera on the dog, which I assume is happens by default through some kind of app, and then you would need some kind of lever mechanism to
gimbal.
engage to engage the trigger, and then somebody makes one of these things and lets it loose, in Times Square.
Or Tyler, just look at the Optimus's hand function. They already got the opposable thumb function and the finger, extension, flexion, supination, all those hand movements. Not entirely, but the most useful one. And they have also simplified the actuator to have back and forth and side to side movement to scale it up for production. So the hands are already there for Optimus. I'm not sure whether that technology is openly available for others, but Tesla in the previously have opened their patents for others to replicate or use to create EVs. So those hand thing is already done by Optimus. It can be used for that. I'm not sure. That's why we need regulations that the robots or AI can't be used to harm human beings.
I don't know. If I was going to go into a fight, I'd be more scared about these Boston Dynamics robots instead of Optimus and his hand.
And
Yeah.
with respect to regulation, I think it's the U.S. that is standing in the way of regulating any sort of this stuff because I think they benefit the most. So there's actually an entire documentary you can watch on YouTube where there's several activists who go to the UN to actually petition the U.S. to try to regulate some of this stuff.
I believe the AI stop button problem, as it's called, you can do some YouTube video searches for the AI stop button problem. I think it's unresolved philosophical problem. So it's basically, if we're going to get robots to do our bidings, how do we, and then we get in the way of achieving that goal. How do you reconcile that loop? Go make me a cup of coffee. I'm going to stand in front of you and stop you making me a cup of coffee, but without cancelling the order. You're going to push me out the way. You're going to kill me. It's look it up. There's plenty of good YouTube videos. It's not resolved yet. It's a philosophical problem rather than a technological problem. Asimov's laws of robotics don't cut it, unfortunately.
Okay, so there's a lot of remote gun trigger devices out there that are very simple and very cheap. So, and they show a shooting. I'm looking at photos and videos of shooting ranges where
Are you talking about Texans again, Tyler?
the
Simple and cheap
person
things that fire guns.
is standing. The gun range that they're standing at, the gun is mounted to a table, and the person is standing, 3 meters behind it with a switch in their hand, and is able to activate the switch. This little device called a remote trigger switch, a trigger pull switch. These are trivial. One you can buy them on Amazon, in fact, called Spear Gun Remote Trigger.
Yeah, there's actually an article that I shared from 2 months ago where if you check my PTR now, let's pull to refresh so you can see my profile picture. There's a photo of one of those robot dogs with rather intimidating looking assault rifle.
Anyway, this is just one of those things where technologically it just doesn't take much.
It's like a DIY project.
It's a weekend backyard garage project, somebody's going to do it. It's really just a matter of when and where. And what are you going to be able to do to stop a robotic dog with a machine gun firing in the middle of Times Square?
A few things you can
So,
do. You can drive a car into it. Um,
yes.
jam the EMC, so jam the radio frequency, but that's going to take longer. Somebody's not just wandering around with a jammer. I think the quickest thing to do is ram it in the car.
Other than Ben, I don't know who's going to be
You
walking
can
the
you
jam.
can just tie the legs with some kind of a metal kind of wire and string, and it will
Hey,
topple
hey, you
over.
first, Aram. You go ahead. You walk up to that gun wielding robot and you
You
tie
don't
its legs.
have to
I'm gonna
walk
sit
up to
behind hard.
it. You
I'm
don't have
gonna
to
sit
walk
behind
up
hard
to it.
cover.
You don't have to walk up to it to make it lose its balance. It just needs some kind of obstruction while it's running, and it's going to lose its balance and fall down. Any kind of
Yeah, but
obstruction
as it
will
falls,
do.
it's going to shoot, and it might keep shooting as it falls, which might become a danger to even more people. So it's definitely a very
Shoot
difficult.
back. Shoot back at it.
You got to stuff the
Throw a
trigger
bomb at it. Shoot
device.
shoot back at it. Why can't you shoot it? If it's
It
shooting
could be
at you.
reinforced metal, so it could be hardened against bullet impacts. So that would make it difficult.
Don't be so
Okay, then
violent.
you also have the vest to protect yourself if we are going in that direction, and then have your gun shoot at the gun that is mounted on top of the robot, or use a drone to drop something at top of it, like a net, and catch it in a net. It's going to fall down.
So by this
Yeah, the
time,
net.
we've designed one of these vehicular kind of robots to deliver food in one of these rough areas, right? So it's got all the protection on it, and it's just going to run people over now. By now, like so that it survives in Compton and the little village in England and other places. So this thing is going to be robust because we've basically made it robust, right? So nobody can do anything to it.
Try it in Texas, Cal. It's not going to
Or they
stand a
can take it
chance.
out in
People
Texas.
have so many like guns here; they're gonna shoot at it.
Texans
In
can take
Texas, you
anything
have
out.
no
Okay,
chance.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, so Eric sent me, and I'm now watching this very cheap dog with a machine gun on its back, and it's firing, blowing up stuff remotely, obviously. And
Yeah, a
it's
friend of
very,
mine did that
yeah,
with a flying drone and his kids over a weekend. So they had like a BB gun or something, and they made a flying BB gun drone, and that was about 2 years ago. So. In this video or the thing you're discussing is from 2 months ago, so it's pretty wild. I posted the link in the side, and for folks who want to check it also on Twitter. Yeah, it's crazy.
A paintball gun on its camera might be the best defense. Actually, thinking about it, because it'd be easy enough to armor
Hmm.
it up against everything. But yeah, paintball gun to the rescue. Block the camera.
Yeah, or shoot at the sensor, shoot at the camera, shoot at anything that's using for directions. And no, it's not that difficult. It's not a human being that's going to think.
Are
It
you a
has
shooter, Aaron? Because it sounds like you're just like a badass.
what? I play a bunch of video games. I mean, and I know how these things work, and I can shoot guns, and I know how to disassemble and reassemble rifles. So not a problem.
Wow. Yeah.
Don't,
Okay.
don't you
I'll,
mean you
I'll,
used to play video games before you kicked the habit and put them in the cupboard, Aaron? Or is this a recent
Yes, I had to lock them away.
But you self-regulate by meditating, so that's good. I'm feeling
Yes, I
reassured.
try to calm myself down. Yes, by meditating.
okay. Next topic is Tiger Global's aiming to raise $6 billion for its next fund to invest in tech companies, less than half of what it raised for its prior fund. Twitter starts rolling out an edit button to Twitter Blue subscribers in the US a few days after giving it to subscribers in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And ByteDance, the parent of TikTok, says revenue grew nearly 80% year over year to 61.7 billion, but operating losses more than tripled year over year, which is exactly, yeah, well, to 7 billion. So they still are kicking ass, and they're growing like crazy when everyone else is not. While Facebook is freezing hirings, ByteDance is growing revenue at least 80% year over year. That's tremendous. So those are the big boring headlines for today. Now we get into the tweets. Did anyone have a tweet? Did anyone see an article that we should share today? Now's your chance. We will jump into the tweets here. So BB found one from BBC. Dancers' moves help to power Glasgow music venue. The dancers' heat is piped via a carrier fluid that can be charged like a thermal battery.
I like to hear Ben's opinion on this.
The
Ben, do you
owners,
think it's practically?
the owners say this
Sorry,
will reduce
yeah, need to
carbon
listen again.
emissions by about 70 tons per year.
Doing
So
what? So let me go check the tweet.
I just retweeted it. Heat energy is being captured from people dancing
Oh
in a
God,
prep.
no, forget it. Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah.
I think more reasonable would be to have a floor that captured the kind of kinetic
Either one.
energy of their dancing.
Well, how many people do you have in a nightclub? Roughly 100,
How about
1,000,
assuming 200?
Well,
Yes,
depending on
200.
the,
Okay,
you could optimize the type of music to really get the most energy out of them.
you could, and you might get another watt or two.
maybe.
You won't even get. Yeah, yeah. No,
I bet you could
basically.
power. I bet you could power the sound system though.
Oh yeah, you could power the sound system. Yeah, and then if they stop dancing, the sound system. Now you're talking, because then if they stop dancing, the sound system goes off. So
It gets
like this
louder.
is like a
It gets
yeah
louder
yeah
the
yeah
faster they dance. Yeah.
yeah
How
that you
about,
could do.
how
You
about
could
the
power the
jumping?
sound system.
Jumpings? How about jumpings? Those jumpings on the ground.
All a waste of energy. Food has an embedded energy ratio of at least 6 or 7 to 1. So you've got to eat you've got to put the energy in to make the food, and you've got to eat the food. Then you're spending the food, so you're wasting, nearly well, wasting like 5, 6, 6/7 of your energy just going from energy to food before you even put it in the human that does the thing. But it would be fun if the music tempo, the music volume changed depending on what you're doing on the floor. It'd be like a massive game of whatever that Dance Revolution or whatever that arcade game was. Could
That
be
sounds Dance Revolution Speed Edition, where Keanu Reeves comes back and there's a bomb in the floor, and
yeah, it'd be some sort of mock up, mash up of a mosh pit and Dance Revolution and some greenwashed dynamo. It sounds weird.
Okay. Next up, BB found one from Axios. The headline is simply AI becomes a political superweapon. Who's most likely to vote or give the most? The algorithm knows. Consultants for both major parties, the Republicans and Democrats, are hovering up voter data to hone advanced fundraising tactics and persuasion tactics. These data tools are especially useful in down ballot local races. So, we've now gone from politicians having no clue at all about data or AI or any of it. None. No clue whatsoever. To now being power users themselves for their own purposes. Which in
Maybe
the
they are inspired by TikTok
well,
because
in China was the first to really do this at scale, and they did it to consolidate their power and to neutralize any potential threats so that they can, have stay in power forever. So, well done. In the U.S., or what we're seeing the U.S. version of this, where politicians are constantly have to run for re-election, but they're going to use these tools to give themselves an asymmetrical advantage in their campaigns for their re-elections, and that's exactly what they're doing now.
so
So,
do you think that you need a regulation on this if it's doing like secretly?
no, well, here's what's going to happen: the politicians won't allow those regulations to happen, just like they won't stop Citizens United or paying politicians, money under the table. They're never going to stop that because they have their own conflicted self-interest. So they're not gonna approve any regulations that's going to defeat their own secret sauce.
That's okay. It's happening, and it happened, and happening.
Yeah, no politician will vote on the idea that politicians aren't going to be able to use AIs because they're all going to be using AIs and they don't want to, you know, shoot themselves in the foot. Next is from Reuters from Valerie. Google to invest $600 million in Japan. According to Google's CEO told Nikkei Japan, Alphabet's Google plans to invest $690 million in Japan in the next 2 years, according to Sundar Pichai. That's a lot of money. They're really ramping up
Yep.
Japan.
I think it's
Watch out,
good. Then
Yahoo
they don't have to
Japan.
pay tax. They don't have to pay Japanese tax then. They just reinvest.
And goodbye, Yahoo Japan. Valerie found this one that the iconic Goodwill gets serious about national online shop for thrifters. About time, Goodwill. Goodwill in the US, for those who don't know, is where all of everybody's used clothes ends up. In massive showrooms of incredibly cheap used clothes. Why not put it online so that people can search through all of it and buy it? Because people don't like going to Goodwill. They like giving their stuff there. They don't like going there. But if it was online, now you're talking. They're going to make a ton of money off of that. And EU bans crypto services for Russians in new sanctions over Ukraine. That's super interesting because Russia just decided they're going to allow cryptos. And now here you have Europe saying any crypto companies from Europe, if you're a European-based crypto company, you cannot do business with Russia because Russia is now trying to embrace crypto to get around sanctions, and you're not going to be able to help them. The US is going to do the same too, and that's going to leave Russia stuck with using non-EU, non-US based crypto options, essentially. An array of crypto-related services have been targeted in the latest round of sanctions on Russia approved by the EU. Twitter doesn't want you to screenshot tweets anymore, is the next headline that Stephanie found. It wants active users on Twitter viewing tweets instead of screenshots of tweets. And so what they have done now is when you try to take a screenshot of a tweet inside of Twitter, it will say, would you like to share this tweet? And they'll let you know you can now share tweets to people who don't have Twitter. So,
Hey, Tyler, on the last, I couldn't get off mute fast enough. On the last, with Russia endorsing crypto and the US and EU likely to retaliate, um, wouldn't it be pretty easy to set up shell corporations in areas that don't look like Russia and use those transactionally and just keep moving them in the shell game?
yes, that is possible. Although those companies are risking getting a very serious hand slap if they get caught. But yes, there's ways of around this. I mean, Coca-Cola started Fanta to sell to Germany during World War, so yeah, there's ways around these things. You could it's a rebranding basically. You would beyond creating a new company in another country. You'll have to create a new brand as well, obviously, because if anyone sees that your brand is operating, in Russia via some other country, they're gonna know what's up.
Don't companies out of Luxembourg, for example, do business with Iran and don't face much repercussions? So I'm not sure if that's if I understand that correctly, but I was curious if anyone knew more about that. So
I'm not aware of that. Okay.
Tyler, I think Alexandra has some news about the Supreme Court cases on the Section 230 and the AI bill. Apparently, it's quite a huge, it has huge implication.
She's on stage now. If you want her to bring it up,
Sure, go
I
ahead.
can pin an article on top. Alexandra, I'm going to pin the article.
Hey, yeah. So there's two cases right now that the Supreme Court has accepted cert for, which means that they've accepted. They decided to hear them. So when in the U.S. when a case is tried and then it's appealed, and then if someone wants to appeal it, then they have to apply to the Supreme Court to be heard. And if it is, the Supreme Court usually says no. There's a couple of reasons why they say no that has nothing to do with like their own desire. It's basically like if their answer to whatever the federal question is doesn't have any overall impact on the case itself, they won't do it. There's not good standing, etc. Some of the people in here were already in the room where I discussed a lot of these issues already, but the big issues here are there's also something in Congress right now that's like 5 bills wrapped into one, like a big burrito bill of the Section 230. And Section 230, remember, is this residual piece of law from this 1996 Communications Decency Act, which fundamentally doesn't even exist anymore. It is really just this one piece of it, which is that if you're essentially a platform is different from a publisher. You are not liable for third-party publications that are illegal. Like the platform itself doesn't get looped into issues with the uh, if someone has to sue another party for saying something online, if the platform wasn't involved in it, then they don't get sued as well. And the issue there is the whole problem with moderation, right? So here there are two cases that basically involve they're associated with ISIS factions. One was based on a recruitment ad that was in YouTube that someone saw, recruited because of that ad, right? The algorithm made that ad appear, right, for that particular user. And in that part, whatever they were watching, the algorithm did that. And so that person was recruited to ISIS, and that particular ISIS faction was responsible for like killing something like 130 people in Paris. I think that was Charlie Hebdo. I don't know for sure, but one of the surviving families is a U.S. citizen and was one of the people who's suing under this particular law, and they're looking for liability for YouTube and, of course, Google, which owns YouTube. So that's a huge issue, right? And then there's another one that is also, I believe, against Google. It's another thing about ISIS. And the whole point here is that the appellate court judges and the Supreme Court were actively hunting for cases they could take up to reevaluate Section 230. So the first thing is this is an activist court. Activist courts aren't just progressive courts. They're also conservative courts. And right now, most of the feeling in the legislative and now the judiciary branch in the U.S. are very anti-big tech. And they announced during the time that the Dobbs case came out, if you guys remember that, where it overturned Roe v. Wade, the abortion law, they announced that they were looking for cases. This was Clarence Thomas, I believe, who did this, saying that they wanted to overturn or at least reevaluate Section 230, the protection that allows big tech companies to grow enormously. And the whole point of 230 is that it removed moderation, the ability to moderate essentially from platforms to protect themselves from liability from third parties. And one of the implications of this, so there's a huge number of implications. It's either going to be, depending on how this case turns out, assuming that it goes against Google, right? So the implications are going to be that platforms now have to actively moderate, which means scaling is going to be much more limited. Alternatively, if they rely on algorithmic growth, right, using algorithms to push product out or push, one something to someone else, push things to users. If they rely on those, then it's going to have to be limited to a large extent because those algorithms are not moderated, right? What they're doing is either they're going to say that those algorithms are actively promoting something, and they can't use algorithmic growth. They can't use algorithms to promote products because that alone is going to involve the platform's use in bringing certain things to certain people, which will make a bad outcome, right? So anybody who has a bad outcome as a result of people connecting or interacting on a platform can sue the platform as well, because that happened because of an algorithm. So that means that either they can't use algorithms, or they can use algorithms, but they have to have active moderation. Both of these mean fundamentally platforms are going to change. Does it mean that platforms are going to fail? Absolutely. No, not really. But it does mean that things will have to change. And the argument that we can't hire moderators because it's so expensive is irrelevant, right? Like, you can not hire moderators and just take on the liability, or you can hire moderators and then actively kick out people who have the likelihood of causing harm to someone else or creating liability for you. There's also going to end up being insurance companies that will have to insure these people from civil liability, right, and even criminal liability. So there's a lot of different implications that can happen as a result of how these cases come out. I don't think that it's likely that countries are going to, or companies are going to geo-block the U.S. because there are a lot of signs that other countries would like a way to do this as well. There's a lot of political action, or at least interest, like voiced interest, in limiting the power that the platforms have that is uncontrolled by choice. So one of the interesting things that has also happened that's unrelated, but I think is going to give us a good sign of how growth is going to happen in the future, assuming these cases go against the companies as we anticipate, is there's a new social media app called Fizz in Stanford, which is apparently it's getting a huge amount of traction. I don't know if you've discussed it previously, but Fizz is essentially actively moderated. It's run by a guy who's a veteran in Silicon Valley, not necessarily a vet, like a military vet, but a longtime Silicon Valley, executive. And his daughter came home very excited that she met the new Mark Zuckerberg, and he was very skeptical. But apparently the thing about this app is that it's pleasurable to use, because a lot of that content, that hateful content and bullying and things like that, are controlled because they hire moderators. So right now, I think it's at Stanford. It'll expand to the West Coast Ivies, and then the East Coast Ivies, and they hire moderators at every school. So assuming they can do that and implement procedures for easy moderation, or at least procedural moderation, then I think that that's probably going to be the new direction of growth, which actually is good, because that's employment, right? You're going to be employed as a moderator, and that's good too. So, but this is really, it's really important actually to see how this stuff is going to work out. A lot of platforms rely on algorithms in order to reach people, and they actually do tend to bring together people that have more extreme interests that end up encouraging each other. So if this had been overturned, like when the Walmart shooting happened in El Paso, then that the 8chan server, the platform on which the people met and encouraged the person and gave the shooter a plan, not only would the shooter and all of those people involved in planning be liable, but so would that platform that they met on, and the server that hosted them. So this
I
is
don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. Because those are not U.S. based. So U.S. could say that whole platform is illegal, and it would make no difference because they're not in the U.S.
no. This is the interesting thing, actually, is that the U.S.'s reach now is like it's extreme.
I don't
Our
disagree with that, but companies in other countries are not, unless they have a U.S. office. If they're based, they can do whatever they want. So you're saying that this
that is
company
true.
couldn't
That's
set
why
up shop in Russia
I
and it would have
understand.
no
That's
reach?
why I said that it's interesting that other countries are actually are interested in doing this as well. And the thing about the overseas our reach is that even if you're an overseas company and you have overseas officers and you don't even have an account in the U.S., they've still managed to seize assets of companies that are not U.S. companies, right? So we've gotten to seize assets for companies where one founder maintained one personal account in the U.S., where a name was registered with a U.S. company, just the internet name, where there was one founder who maintained a rental residence in the U.S. that they did not live in. There's like it's incredible.
Okay,
That
but now you're
is,
talking about the U.S. I mean, that's overreach. I mean,
it
you're
doesn't matter.
talking about the
I understand.
law.
I understand what you're
They
saying, that it's
can
overreach.
okay,
What I'm
they can
saying is
reject the
this is
law, they reverse it, and that's not going to have an effect. I mean, there's a
no,
dark
no,
web for a reason. They can share
no. But
whatever they want. You're
no,
not
dark
stopping it.
web does not grow the same way that the open web does. But what
Of
I'm
course it
saying
does.
is, even if no, it doesn't. And even if
Okay,
Tor doesn't work the same as regular servers, just doesn't. So,
I know
but what I'm
exactly
saying
how it
is,
works,
even
and
though
it's
you may
growing all
say,
the time for this reason.
e- even though you may say that it's overreach for a company, for the US to do things, and I agree, there is significant overreach at this point. The fact is that they're still able to maintain seizure. Now you can file a case against the US and try to reverse it, etc. But the point is that this has actually been permissible. So they're taking assets. That is the reality of what it is. Doesn't matter if you think it's wrong or right, or if I think it's wrong or right. The reality is this is where we are right now, and other countries are also not particularly pleased with the platforms that are basically unmoderated
Okay,
platforms.
but what you were talking about before was U.S. legislation. So I don't know how we got into this whole thing where the
This is
U.S.
not
now
legislation.
rules
This
the
is
world.
court cases. These are court
Okay,
cases,
well,
right? And they're
all I'm
looking
saying
for.
is it's not going to stop a 4chan. It's not going to stop any of those. Anybody who wants to set up shop in another country where U.S. laws are not relevant. Yeah, the U.S. could say, hey, I'm going to open up a warrant and Britain, please give us Edward Snowden. No, we won't give him to you. I mean,
That's
everything goes
that
through a
finance
process.
showed us that that doesn't work that way. Actually, that it actually does work where their countries are now uniting. I've had zero coffee and I am still trying to do this, but
Countries have been
no,
uniting forever. Doesn't mean
no,
that Russia is going to hand over a criminal or stop a company from operating because it goes
poss-
against U.S. law.
yes,
Yeah, the
but
only time that
did
Obama
you
spoke English was when he said to, or the only time that Putin spoke English to Obama was when Obama asked him for Snowden, and he said, "You cannot have him." So
right?
apparently, that's the only time he's ever spoken English. So,
So they can go to Russia. Then it sounds like that will work. But if you saw what happened with Binance, right now we actually have a lot of harmonization of regulations, but more importantly we have united force enforcement, right? So if you saw what happened with Binance, we had Canada starting, and then the UK, the US, and then what happened from there, we added Thailand and Japan, Korea, Singapore, and then and they wanted the headquarters on Cayman. And Cayman said, no way, they're not doing anything. They just registered here. And a day later, they came back and said, wait, we think they improperly registered. What happened in that day? Very likely, through back channels, the US, UK, Canada, Singapore, etc., all said, look, you are welcome to not try and enforce what we are saying as well. That's fine. But any company that is registered in Cayman is going to find itself under significant investigation if they try to do business within our jurisdictions. And immediately they came back and said, oh, wait, I think we found something. Is it likely that Binance improperly registered in Cayman? Absolutely not. They literally do one thing there, which is register companies. And then there's some tourism, but that's it. So it's unlikely that happened. There is actual pressure right now that is being put on countries to comply and harmonize their financial crimes, not just garden variety crimes. This is unprecedented, but it is powerful. And when you
But was
find
it
that
the
there are
fear of not being able to do business frictionlessly in the future? Is that what you're implying, if I understand it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the tools that they have, which is essentially if you don't come on board, we'll treat you like a financial rogue state, the same way that they do with companies that don't comply, or countries that don't comply financially, or sorry, criminally, right? Like, so if the governments are not coming on board to the UN environment, et cetera, what happens? Essentially, what they do is they try to negotiate. When it doesn't work, what they do is treat that country as a rogue state, right? They basically exclude it from all sorts of international
Yeah,
operations.
I'm not sure they're gonna. I'm not sure they're gonna do that for a Facebook company. So they're not. I mean, we're talking
You
about
think
here
they would
about
do it
Section
for
230.
Binance?
Do I think that they would do it for if Facebook was a
No, no.
Russian-based company?
You think they would do it for
I'm,
Binance? Nobody thought
look,
they'd
if
do
it
it for
wasn't
Binance.
possible, what? So you're saying that I can't set up an online poker in the Cayman Islands and do business in the U.S.? Is that what you're saying? I mean, we're talking about
If
something
you are
that's a
committing
U.S. law.
financial crimes, honestly, if you wanted to do that, you can, as long as you're operating within the Ouija and all the other laws,
Of
right?
course they have. Well, online gaming was illegal in the U.S. for a long time, but but everybody had poker
Yeah,
tournaments, right, in the
yeah.
U.S.
I can actually address that if anybody ever wants to. Right, which is basically the online. Right, online's been operating in the Caribbean forever, and the only crackdown the United States was actually able to do was against Americans actually having accounts for online poker because of the banking system. So they put pressure on the banks that said if they use your credit cards, you're going to be in trouble, and that's how they basically shut down Americans from playing online poker, but they did not shut down the online casinos all over the world, and there are still Americans with online sports accounts down in the Caribbean. And and
Yep.
and, and, and really, it comes down to the willingness to want to do something, and,
It,
and
it- that is
a
That's
lot of
exactly right. I don't think there's the same, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to actually take off very quickly, but this is exactly right. It is about the willingness of these other jurisdictions, which is why, going back, what I said is that these other countries have been looking for a way to control what these tech companies are doing, to the extent that they're very interested in finding a way to shut these down. The US, if it goes this particular way, right, the US would help. And it's not as useful for these countries to independently do it if Facebook or other platforms say, okay, fine, we're just going to not use your country, right? But if many countries do that, you have a problem. That is what we're starting to see right now. Of course, it has to do with the willingness of these jurisdictions to come on board. If they're not going to do it for everything. We outlaw things that other countries don't care about all the time. Other countries outlaw things that we don't care about all the time. But what I'm saying is, where there's interest in other jurisdictions as well as the US is starting to look at putting it on hooks here. So to the extent there are other countries that are willing and interested in doing this, and there have been a number of signals that they are, those countries will come on board and enact something similar. To the extent that they're not interested, then they're not interested. But this is still going to be problematic to a large number of Americans and companies that are American companies. So I'm just saying that. And of course, American investors in foreign companies that are dealing in something that has a lot of civic liability and criminal liability.
Alexandra, thank you so much. I was in your room yesterday. It was awesome. As it usually is when you open the mic. I think we're the most important issue here is that the U.S. is kind of stepping up on tech regulation. We all are familiar, and we're going back and forth a bit on the likelihood of, in the pipeline of cases, the judicial, legislation, and law enforcement. That's all loosey goosey. It really depends on the context, depends on political context, all kinds of. But this is unprecedented over the past several years, right? So now we don't have to necessarily look to the UK to be the one who's leading the charge with GDPR, things like that. And that's something I brought up yesterday in your room was, how does this affect just all the backdoor third party data services? And we'll just have to wait and see. But this is a watershed moment when it comes out for sure.
Alex, actually, I have a kind of constitutional question for you though on this whole 230 thing. Trump has some lawsuits. I mean, I know he has a lot of lawsuits, but the ones he filed a couple of years ago I thought were interesting, where he was arguing that 230 effectively made like Twitter a government actor because it effectively gave them such immunity that even though typically, as we know, the First Amendment is a restriction against the government censoring you, not against private companies censoring you. Twitter's a private company, and he was claiming 230 effectively made them a government actor. So that's one thing. But other than that type of an issue, that type of an argument, um, what is the constitutional issue that's being, debated here? Because you could argue 230 is bad policy because it allows these these platforms to be toxic, but it was passed by Congress. So where is the constitutional issue that 230 is unconstitutional in a broad sense? I understand Trump's argument. I think that may have something that if you say that it makes them it makes them a government actor, and therefore allowing them to do censorship actually is a problem because the government shouldn't be able to censor. But what's the constitutional issue here?
So are you saying of not of 230 or of Twitter being able to censor?
No, 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 no. I understand Twitter. Trump may have an argument on Twitter, but I understand his argument. But these other cases that the court has agreed to take, basically, for example, if somebody wants to show you how to build a bomb, okay, and they want to put it on social media, and they say the platform's not responsible because there's a 230 exemption. I mean, the individual might still be responsible, but 230, the platform won't be responsible. That was rightfully or wrongfully a congressional decision. But so why doesn't Congress have that power? What is the constitutional issue?
Oh,
That
so for Section 230, so interestingly, the Supreme Court doesn't necessarily only deal with constitutional issues. They have constitutional review over laws, right? But over cases, remember they're an appellate court. So they will hear federal cases, right? Sometimes they have primary jurisdiction, which would be in cases where like two states have have a conflict, right? They can't be heard in either state. They have to go to the government, to the Supreme Court. And then in issues where there is significant federal question, there just has to be a federal question for the Supreme Court to hear a case, right? They don't hear state law questions, but they do hear federal law questions. And then this was that list of things. This is what I was kind of glossing over before of the requirements that they have. You have to have standing. You have to have essentially something that has the ability to be resolved. It has to have it has to matter when the Supreme Court listens to it. So if they have a state issue and a federal issue, but the federal issue is irrelevant because the state issue already grants liability, then they won't hear it because the federal issue doesn't have weight. So it has to have a bunch of different qualities in order for it to even be considered. And then the Supreme Court has to look and they determine whether or not this is something that is an important federal question that should be resolved at the Supreme Court level, right? Otherwise, they just revert back to the appellate court decision, or they will make a determination on a particular area and then revert the case given that new clarity to the appellate court. So that's just like a thing that the only thing where it's only constitutional is when they're reviewing laws passed by Congress and and executed by the president, right? They're still entitled to determine whether or not those are constitutional, but most of that happens through case law. They will evaluate. They don't actually like take a law and say we're not going to enforce that law. Usually, the way that happens is someone immediately files an action, and then then it proceeds up the chain to the Supreme Court, and that is how they declare something constitutional, unconstitutional. And interestingly, usually you can tell very early on in an opinion how it's going to end up by their determination of the review status. Like, is it going to be strict scrutiny or intermediate or rational or whatever? All of those matter. You could actually see in the Dobbs decision early on, they spent a big chunk of time explaining why rational review was correct. And as soon as you saw that, you know that they were going to go with the law being upheld. So anyway, those are just like things about the Supreme Court. So this doesn't have to have a constitutional issue. It just has to have a federal question.
No, I
And it
said
does under the federal law.
even the appellate courts are generally are limited in what they agree to take. They don't want to, for example, the appellate courts don't want to be triers of facts. So they also
No,
usually
they don't have a choice in that. Sorry. That one is not optional. The appeals court must take it. They take all appeals. They don't take appeals when those appeals do not have a question of law. If there is a question of fact, that is only for the circuit court. They cannot
that's correct.
retry the
Yes,
case.
correct. That's exactly what I
But
said.
it's not optional. Yeah.
Right. So when you have a question of law, right? What is the question of law broadly in some of these 230 cases? Because I think most of the argument against 230 is a policy question. You know, I mean, not whether it's whether Congress had the authority. Are there cases basically suggesting that Congress did not have the authority to even grant the exemption?
No.
Okay.
That's not the question here. The question here is at this point in time, and we have to see what their analysis is and what the arguments are because we don't have that right now. But the it looks like what the question is for is this exclusion that exists for civil or criminal liability something that can still or should still exist. I mean, to the extent of constitutionality, it's essentially like, is this particular rule? Is this something that is applied constitutionally, right, or can be applied in a fair manner? Now, there's the way that you apply it or look at a law and its application. Again, depends on its review, the review that the court decides to apply. They don't have a lot of leeway in terms of how that law is applied because the reasons you go to higher levels of review, like higher levels of scrutiny, are based on the parties and issues that are in the case. So you kind of have them or you don't. So what the court does to make this turn out in a way that they're looking for it to turn out is they want to get a case that has exactly the right circumstances so that they can apply the review that they want. That's why they took a case, the Dobbs case, right? They took this, I think it was a Texas case, I think, where the law was not making abortion illegal. It made abortion practitioners committing crimes because those practitioners could be male or female. That means it didn't have an unfair effect on women or a discriminatory impact on women only, which means they avoided intermediate review, which means they could do rational review, which means they could uphold the law. Do you see it? Like, it's complicated how it works, but it's once you get used to kind of like looking at those rhythms, you can very easily see what the court wants to happen. And that's why I say it's a very activist court, because they've said that they're seeking out cases and here's what we want. And that is something that we haven't seen before on the Supreme Court level. They're not supposed to do that at all.
Okay. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 quick headlines to share. The first is from Phil via The Verge. A former Facebook engineer wants to help you make your own cell network called Ukama. Is selling boxes that let you broadcast your home internet connection as LTE. It envisions people using it to build a crowdsourced cellular network. Next up, Stephanie found this one from The Verge. Apple's $1 billion antitrust fine in France is cut down about 60%, down to about 366 million. And also from Stephanie, Tesla's first semi-trucks will be delivered December 1st to Pepsi. As Elon Musk just tweeted in recent hours, that he's excited about the very fun to drive Tesla semis that will be delivered on December 1st. Evan found the next one, that farming robot kills 100,000 weeds per hour with lasers. A person can weed about 1 acre of crops per day. The smart robot can do 20 acres per day. And Evan found the next one from the Daily Mail, that a Michigan high school is deploying an AI system to detect guns in real time. So just retweeted that. And then Ken has the next one about Washington Post, about prominent influencer sues TikTok over ads she says misused her image. Online influencer and reality TV star Bethany Frankel. Is that your relative, Ken?
No, but everybody thinks so. But she's not. And her dad, by the way, was a famous horse trainer named Bobby Frankel. And I used to get the question all the time whether I was related to her dad, but I'm not.
Okay. So Bethany Frankel alleges that TikTok moved too slowly to remove fake ads that showed her promoting a product she had nothing to do with. And the last is from Evan, and I guess he's listening and found this one, that China pairs an armed robot dog with drones that can be dropped from anywhere. So now we've got the real hat trick. Not only can you combine, and there's really amazing footage of this dog with a machine gun on top, much better than the one Eric found. And this dog can now crouch to the ground and be picked up by a drone and be flown into action.
GG, I guess.
Yeah. So what the Bethany Frankel case is about, by the way, is apparently she was helping market like a high line, a more expensive whatever, cardigan sweater or something, and then somebody took part of that content with her and then switched the part of what the actual sweater is to a cheaper version, okay, and made it look like she was, you know, endorsing this cheaper version of a sweater, and that actually caused some problems because some people realized that it was, kind of a cheap knockoff, and she was criticized by some of her followers, and so that pretty much is the issue in her case.
Okay. Well, thank you to everybody for another tech news, and
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful weekend. And I
Yep.
guess we're handing it over to Ben, yeah?
Yes, Ben has already started his room, The Limits of Geothermal